All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I am Jean Anderson with the South Central Library System, and I am moderating the management track. Assisting me today is Leah Langby with the IFLIS Library System. Thanks, Leah. And we are so glad that you are here this afternoon. Our presenter for this session is Dara Schmidt with the Cedar Rapids Public Library in Iowa, and she will be presenting Board Support for Success. As you have questions for Dara, please use the Q&A panel or the chat panel, and Dara will answer them throughout the webinar. I'll be popping in periodically with questions. So Dara, whenever you are ready, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We practiced, and so we're going to make sure that, I did good during practice. And am I now sharing my screen with you?
Yes, you are. Awesome.
We use Zoom every single day until you have to do it for a group of people. And then it's like, do I really know how to use Zoom? So thank you all so much for being here today. And as Jean said, I talk really fast. I get really excited. And so please, please, please stop me at any time, put questions in the chat. I would be happy to answer them as we go along, but I did build in a little bit of time at the end as well, if you've got some questions for me. So again, my name is Dara Schmidt, and I'm the director of the Cedar Rapids Public Library in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. This is a picture of our beautiful downtown facility, and we are in the just about to break ground this summer on a brand new branch facility as well. And that happened because of what I'm going to tell you today about the board support for success, the advocacy that your board members can provide, and those long-term relationships that really make things work. And don't put the pressure on you in the same way as the director or manager. If you take nothing else from this today, please take, sometimes it's okay to let your board members be the heavy and to preserve your long-term relationships with other city or county staff. So, one of the reasons that we want to have board supports for success is that it makes your job easier. Being a library director is not an easy job. Being a branch manager or supervisor is not an easy job. And you are often put in really complicated positions that go between boards. And for me, I'm a municipal library. And so that means, I am completely supported by the property taxes of the city of Cedar Rapids. And so, I have to negotiate those relationships between city leadership, between my own board leadership, between other community members. And that stakeholder management is essential in that ongoing success. And when you know who your people are, you know what matters to them, then you know how to talk to them and how to get what you need. So it will make your job easier in the long run if you put in the time and effort to build these relationships with your board members or your trustees. So our Board of Trustees is, again, as a municipal library, we are established by the City Code 6.02. Our board members are appointed by the mayor and then approved by the city council. And so it's not elected boards. And that's great because that gives us a lot of opportunity to make sure that we get the people that we really want on the board. But how that happens, first step is, again, ongoing advocacy and relationships with our mayors, because if they didn't like the library or didn't like the library director, it would be pretty easy for them to make my job harder. In my almost 10 years at Cedar Rapids, I am on mayor number 4. So mayors change a lot more often than library directors do. But, again, having it not just come from me, but come from my trustees. This is who we want. This is who we believe will work the best with us. This is what we're looking for in the qualities of a leader that we want to add to the board. Having those conversations ahead of appointment is essential in making sure that that continues. And it's a lot easier to have great relationships with your trustees when you actually like them as human beings as well. Our board members serve 6-year terms, and there are no term limits. When we are looking for trustees, or when we're doing the work of the staff and the board together, we always start with the question, how can we serve the community better? We have an essential service-minded, a service-oriented mindset, excuse me, and that has to always be at the front and center of how we're doing our work together, especially that really important work that happens in open public session when we're making real decisions about where the library moves forward. This is and always has been, how can we serve the community better? That is our motivation as we've been through both our strategic planning processes and our board recruitment process. So these are our fabulous current board members. Like I said, we've got 9. Of those 9, they elect their own president and vice president. In our bylaws, the president and vice president only serve a 1-year term. However, they almost always do a second year. And so they only serve a 1-year term, but they will always vote for that group. I suppose it could go wrong and maybe they wouldn't vote for those people the second time around, but typically they will end up serving 2-year terms. And then again, in my history, the vice president has always moved to the presidential role, but that's not a guarantee. And so these people come from, you can see by looking at them that they are not all the same race, they are not all the same sex, they are same gender, they do not all come from the same backgrounds. We have various ages, we have retirees, we have people with young families, and so trying in our recruitment to make sure that we have a very good balance between what our different patrons are going to come to the library with. We want that reflected in our trustees as much as possible. When we work with and choose board members, we start with an actual job description. And that is essential because people have to know what they're getting into when they start. I don't know if Wisconsin has this, but the state of Iowa has a job description for board members, and they do curate an entire trustee handbook. It's about 150 pages, so it is quite extensive. And we don't necessarily, we give it to new board members as they start, but we don't scare them and tell them they have to do it all at once. We, as part of our board meetings, go through each section of this handbook for trustees about once every 3 years, because we can't be doing it every single time, but it's important to continually remind people what their responsibilities are in the role that they have chosen. And so these, obviously, the ones that I have on the screen are those essential things that each board member needs to commit to before agreeing to do this volunteer job. And they are required to advocate for the library and the community and advocate for the community as a board member. They are responsible for planning for the future of the library. They monitor and evaluate the overall effectiveness of the library, set our policies, and they hire and fire the library director. That is very clear in Iowa code as well as bylaws for almost every trustee position. Trustees do not manage the rest of library staff. They manage the library director, but that is then the library director's job to manage the rest of library staff. And so that's a really important distinction. By the time a board member gets appointed in Cedar Rapids, they have shown some level of affinity to the library. And that is agreed upon between me as the director and, again, Mayor number 4, now that's our main criteria for consideration. You have to actually like the library. When I first started, that mayor, there was a board member going off. I started in July, and our fiscal year runs July through June. And so just in that June, a few weeks before I started as the director, a board member had rolled off that was specifically put onto the library board because he did not love the library. He did not love taxation for anything other than public safety. And so it was a situation where I think that the mayor's opinion was that they were putting a naysayer out to balance things, and all it did was make everything worse for everyone and everybody's job harder. And so again, through an advocacy process and these great conversations through not just me, but other trustees, now a mayor will tell me, why on earth would I make your job harder? That's only going to make my job harder. And that's a huge win right there. We have, as part of our policy in Cedar Rapids, this is a modified version of the United for Libraries Statement of Ethics for Library Trustees. And so most of what you're seeing on the screen, and I'm not going to read the whole screen to you, most of what you're seeing on the screen is the text straight from that United for Libraries statement. It is so important to our trustees that people follow it, that we have taken it on as Cedar Rapids policy. The thing that we added, because it is alignment in alignment with our laws and our bylaws, is that bolded line near the bottom, which says all authority is vested in the board when it meets in legal session and not with individual board members. And because this is something that people learn about from the beginning, and maybe sometimes your board doesn't like the library or doesn't like each other, like you can inherit those situations and it can take you years to get to a better place. It is important to remember that they only have that power as a body, and one trustee or one board member certainly can have these differing opinions, but they are not going to be able to take down the progress of the library, because they're just one. If you have a majority of a board who does not like the library and is trying to slow progress, that's a much, much, much bigger problem. Dealing with just one or two people, and it, you know, for me, as long as it's only 4 of 9, I'm gonna be okay. So just if you do use this statement for any policy, I would highly recommend adding this line or adding something very similar. So as we have gone through all of these, you know, this is the setup, this is what it takes. Now you're a board member. What then are the most important things that the board does? And for us, it was to set the vision and the mission for the library first and foremost, and then everything else works off of that. Our vision statement is: we are a beacon of literacy to all who seek knowledge and understanding. We are compassionate navigators to the information, resources, and entertainment you seek. We are your library. And our mission statement is: we connect people to information, experiences, and services that enhance their quality of life so our community can learn, enjoy, and thrive. As part of our strategic planning process, our board chose these and now uses them as our guiding statements as we move forward with everything. These are the things that guide everything we do each and every day at the library. And so because we did this together as staff and trustees, this built so much trust between myself and my board that they have said to me, there are lots of times you're going to have to do things and make big decisions, handle issues when we're not meeting in open public session, when we can't be there to provide the support that you need. As long as you are following these statements when you make choices, we have complete faith that you will be doing the right thing for the library. And that's what being a mission-driven library is really all about. We use these to give us the ability to say yes to things. And what was even harder for us is to figure out how to say no to the sometimes really great and amazing suggestions that come to us from staff or patrons or other stakeholders, but we cannot be everything to everyone at the same time. And so again, going back to, this is really great, we would love if this happened in our community, but the library is not the right partner for you because it does not directly align with our mission statement or our vision statement. And these values and guiding principles are, again, that foundational work that we all agreed on together, that no matter what, these things matter to us. The values were also, these are the City of Cedar Rapids values, and the library chose to put them into policy on our own because what's there to disagree with when it comes to these statements? We serve enthusiastically, we find a way, and we team up. Those are things we want our staff doing every single day, no matter what, and they do. And you can go to any staff member at the library for certain, and probably mostly for the entirety of the City of Cedar Rapids, all 1,400 staff members, and ask them what the city values are, and they will be able to recite those to you. That is how deeply ingrained those values are in our day-to-day work. And when my staff have to make those decisions when I'm not here, when things are happening someplace else, when I'm in a webinar and things are happening outside my door, if they are aligning with these city values and these guiding principles, they know hands down they will have my support every moment of every decision, just like I know I have my board support when I have to make these choices as well. And it's not just that we know them, it's actually that we believe in them. We want to work this way because it makes our jobs easier, it makes our jobs better, and we are better together than any one of us is individually. And that helps us figure out how we will serve our community better. So once we have the mission and the vision and the values, right, then we actually have to create a strategic plan. So we took all of those things and then we went through, you know, your standard, like everybody does. We did some patron surveys. We did executive interviews with high impact community partners or big players in Cedar Rapids who were maybe not such great library users or library partners, but they had a really good handle on where the community was going and what was going to be happening next. And we did staff day visioning sessions. We went through all of our usage data and we came up with this plan that is staff's responsibility to execute over a 3-year time frame. And it's going to end up being 4 because life happens, but over a 3-year time frame. And it is the board, though, who created the plan, who voted on the plan, who has set that direction, and their comfort with the direction has allowed us to continue to do the work and to grow with that trust that we've built together. But like I said sort of glibly, we have a plan. And the plan's really good. And then life happens and the plan has to change. And so how do you continue to build and grow that trust while things are changing around you and you maybe cannot achieve the things that you thought 3 years ago were going to be? And has anybody achieved anything they thought they were going to? I guess 4 years ago now, but life has changed a lot. And so we've got to figure out ways to communicate well and make sure that we are living up to the standards that our board expects of us, while at the same time being flexible enough to change those tactics or those goals so that we are really meeting the community needs of the time while not forgetting where we're trying to go in the future. So we have a very simple reporting structure where we keep the board informed with a handy landy little calendar chart, and it's just when something changes from, you know, a start to an end time on the chart that you're seeing, the board can expect that they will hear about it in a trustees meeting. And so on our standard agendas, we always keep the strategic plan as part of the library director's report, so that it's always part of my section H on this list for you. The other thing that is essential is we have a standing item on our agendas. It is F here, and it just says XX because, you know, we change it. It changes every single month. And we fill that board education in, typically with something that is happening on that strategic plan, but we are in process. So we're not ready to report out on failure or success. We're not ready to say, like, here's where we really want to go with this, but we want to be able to tell them, here's what we're working on. Here's what staff are doing. If it's going to be something big and bold that will eventually require a board vote or change something significant in how the library is currently doing things, we want to be able to say, remember when we warned you about that? And we want to be able as staff to get that feel. So even if they're not voting on it, if we're having a conversation with a full board in an open session and we say, nobody really is using our computer lab anymore. And so we've been talking about technology and how we want to, grow technological literacy in our community. And we want to shut down that computer lab entirely. And we'd like to make it more of a workforce oriented makerspace. That's a significant change that'll require some financial investment eventually for a board vote, but also just changes how the building is set up in a certain way. And if the board members, when we had that conversation, have been like, oh, what are you talking about? We didn't talk about this as part of the strategic plan. You've gone really rogue here. We would want to know that before we did the whole planning process. And so by having this piece of board education in each and every single agenda, it gives us the opportunity to read the room and know how we can move forward. Keeping the board informed of any changes, anything that is outside of where we thought the strategic plan was going to go, keeps that trust relationship going and lets us know if we're trying to move forward down the wrong path before we've invested too much time and too much money into something like that. So we also do, sorry.
I was going to ask, yes, I was going to ask a question as long as you were talking about board education. A question is, what is your process for onboarding new trustees and what are the most critical elements of the onboarding process in your experience? And I thought with education, that might tie right into
Nope, that's
that.
perfect. So for onboarding, what we will typically do is, as I was talking about the relationship with the mayor, so when we have, like the last time we had 3 openings, because they roll off in 3s every 2 years, we had a list of 5 people that we sent to the mayor to say, these are our top choices, but it's your job to choose, but there were no bad choices on that list. So we made it easy for her to make a great choice. And then I just get an email from the city clerk that says, congratulations, here are your new board members. And they were not the 1, 2, 3, they were the 1, 2, 4 on the list. And that's great. That's fantastic. But we knew we were working with something good. So then with the library, which is different than any other city board or commission because we have asked for it to be, instead of the city clerk directly contacting those people to congratulate them and welcome to the library, she tells me first so that I can reach out to those new trustees and welcome them to the library as the library director. And then like a week later, she'll send them the standard city email. So we start with that, me being the first person who gets to have that happy interaction and conversation. If it's somebody I already know, I probably will just call them and get to have a conversation because it's always more fun if you're talking. Sometimes it's just an email. And then immediately we set up an onboarding or orientation meeting. That onboarding and orientation typically, it takes 2 hours. We say it's going to take an hour and a half and it never does. And so we've started putting it as 2 hours because I talk a lot and inevitably there are extra questions. And so we like to do it over lunch and then we feed them and make them even happier. And we use that State of Iowa Handbook for Trustees. We go over the high points. It's, like I said, 125, 150 pages. It's long. And we also have a history of Cedar Rapids library board that we go through because it's like in 1896 when the library was founded, this is what happened. And this is why it's important because the library is such a part of the fabric of our community. We want to make that communicated. And when people are coming in as library trustees, they don't necessarily understand the difference between governance and operations. And so That's a part of the onboarding process, so they know exactly what their roles are and exactly what staff roles are. You don't want any confusion about that ever. So getting that taken care of in the beginning is essential. And we also have all of our policies that we don't necessarily go through in detail, but we go through every single one of them to just say, this is what this is about. This is why the library has this as an official policy. Here's the difference between library policy on some things versus city policy on other things. There are reasons for them to be the same. There are reasons for them to be different, because as a municipal library, that balance between what's city and what's library is also a little bit nuanced. So that's the general agenda. I will make sure that I get the link for Jean to share out of that Iowa trustees manual for everybody, because it's fantastic. And I haven't seen anything quite like that in other states. I know that Wisconsin, you guys do have one, and yours is probably fantastic. I just haven't seen it. But that, you know, that really gives people the place. Does that answer the question?
Sorry, yes. And is it the 2021 edition of the?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep,
because
that
I
is
found the link. I'll put that in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And then one of the other things that we do during orientation is actually to gather what their main interest is, to put people on our committees. And these are the current committees for the Cedar Rapids Board of Trustees. You don't get to pick that you want to be in leadership. You have to be put in leadership. And so as a first-year board member, they will not be attending the leadership committee, but they'll be placed on usually 2, because people, you know, we try to balance it out with the 9 members, and there are only 3 committee members, so that these are not committees that are making decisions or have a quorum of the board. All decisions are made in the formal board meeting, but these committees do have discussions about things. So the main topic areas that people can express an interest in, and I do not choose the committees, the board president chooses committees. Different board presidents have had different different levels of interest, in my opinion, on this, but it's something that I absolutely want to know. We have historically struggled to keep people on the finance committee. We don't have people who love that very much or have a lot of comfort level in it. And so I'm always looking for people, and we we got as a trustee in our most recent group of trustees, someone who is in charge of a wealth management company. And so she has a great knowledge of finances, and she was also several years ago the chair of the committee for a library levy vote that we went for and lost. But she is definitely very financially oriented, but that doesn't mean she'll want to be on the committee. She might be volunteering to serve on the library board because she just really loves books or loves kids or loves literacy or her community, and she does not want to do the same thing as a volunteer that she does in her regular job. And so you have to take a little bit of time during orientation to gauge that interest and see where people want to go and what they really want to be focused on in their work. And we do have people, most of our people end up on a committee and then they like it and they want to stay on that committee. But we have some people who do want to flip-flop, and it's just like, yeah, I did finance. Can I go over to policy? I am so lucky. Usually policy is one that we don't get a lot of volunteers, but I have 3 board members right now who just love creating policy. Like, this is what is fun for them. I think that is one of the most important committees. So I am very grateful to have such incredibly passionate people as part of that. And so leadership, finance, and personnel and policy have been standing committees for quite some time, but the board has the power to create new committees as the need arises. And so it was about 3, maybe 4 years ago now. Time has kind of no meaning since about 2020. We were having these conversations about advocacy, the role of our friend, because we have a friends and a foundation, which is, you know, how special is it and how incredible is it to have 2 supporting organizations? Most people don't they go to their work every day and there's not somebody else going, you're fantastic, here's some more money to do your job. We're really lucky in libraries that we get to have those supporting organizations. But with a Friends and a foundation, we were having some difficulty defining roles and figuring out how things should really go as people were working together. And so we had started having library Friends Foundation meetings at least quarterly with that leadership. And advocacy as a role of supporting organizations was very loosey-goosey for us. And, when people were out and about in the community, they'd just be like, yeah, the library's great. And every year at budget season, we would send out some talking points and say, hey, if you're talking to city council members, if you're doing these things, make sure you say something about this. But that was really the extent of it. And what we realized as staff, and then with the support of the trustees, is the three groups, the trustees, the Friends, and the foundation, have got to work together with the same talking points, with the same communication, with the same level of passion and support for the library strategic plan, the things that we want to do, what's going to happen next. And of course, in those times of advocacy for money, for budget, Iowa's a Midwestern state for intellectual freedom, for being against book banning, for all of those things that we have to be talking about regularly as a community. We need all of those groups to be doing the same thing. So we talked to the board president at the time and said, we would like to form an actual advocacy committee that is unique in that it is not just trustees who are assigned to that committee. There are members of the Friends and Foundation boards who are active members of that committee, as well as the Friends president and the foundation executive director. So that committee does a lot of bigger picture work when we think about community stuff, and I'm gonna talk about one of them in just a minute. But before I get to that, we also, like I mentioned before, we are building a new facility on our west side. That's West Side Project. So that has its own separate committee, but that whole project happened because we had trustees poised to be ready for the advocacy needed to be able to take advantage of an opportunity that, we do have a branch that is in a leased facility. It's in an old Target space, and we pay an insane amount of rent every year. We're at close to $200,000 a year to rent this 30,000 square foot facility, and it is not sustainable long term. But we've been doing it for 10 plus years and putting all of this money into something that we are going to go into very challenging budget times in Iowa in the next 3 to 5 years. For most of our rural communities, it's happening in FY25. Cities of my size have a little bit more buffer, and so we're not going to take the hit as hard until FY26. And remember, FY26 is when I said our lease is going to expire in 2027, which is like in that fiscal year. It's going to be bad. And if we ended up closing out 2027 still in a rental facility, when I am certain we are going to have to make budget cuts based on the tax law changes that our state has put forward, I was not going to have a branch facility. I can see it 5 years down the line, and I know exactly how this is going to work out. And so we, in 2021, got an estate gift from a sweet 103. She was 1 month shy of her 103rd birthday, and she unfortunately passed away from COVID. And she left her entire estate to the library, which is $2 million, which is a huge gift for us. We have occasionally gotten some 6-figure gifts, but we do not get 7-figure gifts as the norm. So that was a really big, life-changing, transformational gift for us. It's not enough to build a new facility. But what we were able to do is to say, gosh, we got this big gift. We now, if a gift is over $100,000, an automatic windfall committee is enacted, and that is members of our foundation and members of our trustees to talk about, okay, this is more money than we thought we were going to get, so what are we going to do with it? What's the big deal? And so the immediate answer was, we need a permanent facility for our branch, because if we do not get that, it is always going to be in a vulnerable position. So we started talking to our city's community development team to say, we want to be in the same neighborhood as our branch. We're committed because it's the, lowest socioeconomic status of all of our neighborhoods. It's the highest incidence of single parents in all of Cedar Rapids. Like, it is a neighborhood where we need to have a public library. So we want it to be close, but it's a high industrial and commercial area. So we're kind of landlocked. There's not a lot of options for what we can do there. So with community development's help, we could start looking for a space where we could actually build a facility. And we were already having those conversations when ARPA money became a thing. And it was, the perfect solution for its one-time funds that are supposed to be for high community impact. It can't be anything that is ongoing program, like you can't use it for operational funds, but we already have operational funds for a branch. We can just take those operational funds and switch them to a new building that belongs to us. And so because of that work and the advocacy of our trustees, who knew what to say, knew where they should be, we were able to secure $10 million in ARPA funds. And so our 2 became 12 immediately. And now our foundation is currently in the midst of a $10 million capital campaign to get us what we need to make it something special. But along with a new library facility, the city is building the library, because we asked super nicely, a brand new city park that will surround that library. And so it will be a unique destination feature for our community. So that's our committees. But that advocacy committee, I keep going back to that word advocacy, because that's what board support looks like out in the world. That committee worked together to create something that we are calling just the advocacy toolkit. This is on Cedar Rapids website right now. If you go to crlibrary.org/advocacy, we've got a whole page that was created essentially by that committee of trustees, friends, and foundation to talk about what are the important things that we need to know as library supporters so that we can continue to ensure the success of the library. It, gives why is this important, our mission and our vision, so everybody knows what we're about, and just a little bit of a history about what's happened in the library. And then when you're going to tell people things like this, when you want them to be your voice out in the community, you got to give them some brag things. So here's great things we've done. Don't forget we're awesome. And then the contacts for federal, state, county, and city. And then and we took these, we've referenced them all. We did not create most of this from scratch. We got this from other places, but I don't think anybody's different. If somebody's different, please let me know, because maybe I want to come live with you. I don't know any community that's not divided right now. Certainly not any community in the Midwest that is not a divided community, but we have to be able to have conversations with each other without just trying to shout over each other about what's important. And this how to talk to people who disagree with you is currently the favorite page in this advocacy toolkit, because it's just some little hints, but it's hard when people are passionate. And, one of the things that I get asked when I do my little road show and talk to different PEO groups and Rotaries and things like that is, how do you talk to people about books when they want to get rid of all the books? And it's just like, you care about kids. I care about kids. I care that kids continue to read. Our literacy rates are terrible in our community at 3rd grade. And if they don't have a choice in what they're reading, they are definitely going to stop, especially in our community, our boys, and especially our Black boys. The reading levels are terrible. And if we're not giving people choices in what they can read, we are absolutely going to lose these kids. And so I want there to be books because I care about kids, right? So you got to start somewhere. this has been a tremendous tool. And then being able to share the legislative information, and Iowa's special, you guys. And when we have things go into state law, we have this whole funnel process that is not like any other state I have ever lived in. And so, Iowa's process is definitely a little different. And so we wanted to make sure that people understand how that works for us. Because it's weird. And then your quick advocacy tips and your how to keep the conversation on what you want the conversation to be on, but how you say that without sounding negative is a big part of what we're working on together. And then some general tips for year-round advocacy. And so that committee worked really hard to make sure that these were the things that we thought would be helpful to anybody in our community who just said, I really love the library. I know times are hard right now, but I don't know how to help. This is exactly how you can help in a clear, straightforward way. And this is what we've been doing with our Board of Trustees for multiple years. This outward facing community document, I think, is the next level of that board support for success. This is what community support for success looks like when you've taken the work with your board and gone on to yet another step of how you work together. So when you do all of those things, you have a level of trust that means when stuff happens that you really wish hadn't happened, and you've got to make really, really hard choices as a leader, you know that your board is going to have your back. They're going to ask questions. That's their job. They should ask questions, but they're going to see that they can trust you, that you're going to make the decisions that are best for the library and the community whenever you can. And so one of my examples on that is we had a really hard time in, my slides are doing this play thing that I don't want them to do. Sorry. I forgot that part was in there. I'm going to let it roll around while I'm talking, and then I'm going to tell you the actual story. We had a really hard situation with a derecho, which, do they have derechos in Wisconsin? Anybody want to help me out?
I think we have, but I think all of us remember when this particular storm went through Iowa.
So what you saw, I do not know why I cannot make my slideshow pause right now. It is not doing what I wanted to do. But these are multiple examples. I'm just going to talk about it as, so there's about to be a picture in just a second as it's rolling where I don't want it to roll, of the staff sitting outside. That's just a fire. This one is a fire. This one is the one I want, and it just doesn't want to stop. It doesn't matter. In our situation, we had 120-mile winds that ripped through our community. Our community lost 70% of our tree canopy in 20 minutes. And the ongoing, I would say, devastation is probably really the best word I've got for that, was unbelievably shocking. And you couldn't go anywhere because there were trees just all over everything. And so we had no power. There was no electricity. We had damage to both of our buildings. And we had to figure out what we were going to do to serve the community, because this is the part that I cannot tell this story without getting a little choked up. So excuse me. People started showing up in the parking lot of that branch facility, that rental, that old Target, because it is surrounded on the outside by low-income apartments. And it was, if you've ever seen a dollhouse, where you open it up and you can just see the inside of everything, the apartment buildings right behind the library were like the worst dollhouse I've ever seen, because the side of the building just got ripped off and you could see inside everyone's apartments. And people didn't know what to do. So they came to the library. We weren't open. We didn't have power, but people started showing up in our parking lot. And it was, we have to do the right thing. We have to keep our staff working. There's not time to ask trustees. There was not time to even go to the city and say, what am I supposed to do with this? What we did was we showed up and started to work. And the city then saw that there were all of these people needing help in the library parking lot. And so they started to create these neighborhood resource pop-ups so that people could get diapers and could get water bottles and could get food and could start filling out their FEMA paperwork by the time we got to that point. And of course, the one in that neighborhood was at the Ladd Library in our parking lot because that's where people already were. That moment, though it was a terrible thing for our community, helped cement the library as an essential resource. That's absolutely part of the reason we got that ARPA funding. That's absolutely part of the reason that we continue to get on, we're going to have a very rough budget year in FY25, as is most of the state of Iowa, because our state leadership chose purposefully to limit growth in all of our cities, and absolutely said when passing the legislation, this is to punish cities. They are growing too fast. They are taking all of our people. They're taking all the kids from the rural areas. So we need to make sure we are slowing down growth in cities. So my community in our tax valuations has a 12.5% increase in the next year. And instead of getting 12.5% more to serve these people, because of the way the state has changed the tax laws and they do this weird rollback thing, we get a 1% increase next year. And that's hard, but in that 1% increase, everything I really needed for the library, I am getting. And the city is committing additional dollars to that new facility and to building me a brand new road, because I wanted one to be a better entrance to the library because of that. I am sorry, I'm going to struggle back through my slideshow for just a second and talk about that. Also meant these pictures are part of the Klein Award. And so the Jerry Klein Community Impact Prize is given to one library a year for the library that has made the greatest community impact. And because of these relationships, because of these stories and support that we've been able to give to our community, that's why we won. The partnerships are what it's really all about. So there's my derecho picture, what that looked like in the parking lot. There's we then, because life is never easy anywhere, then we had a fire in our downtown library that a light fixture that's our main feature lit on fire a year and a half ago, and it caught we had to close the library for 5 weeks because you think fire is bad, smoke is worse, and it spread smoke all the way through the 100-square-foot facility, and there was not an inch of the library that did not need to be cleaned in depth. So instead of closing entirely, you can see the little gate in the back, and then we had to put the staff stations so that you could do checkouts, you could do holds pickups, you could come in just as far as that gate, but we provided the service that we could, and we then got financial support to build that mobile tech lab. So I think I'm just about at 10 minutes left. Am I close, Jean?
Yes, you're almost exactly at 13 minutes left.
I'm going to stop fighting with my slides and pause for questions.
I think one of my trustee training week speakers the year of the derecho, I don't know if she was from Cedar Rapids, but she ended up she had one of her colleagues had to step in for her. So Kathy Koziak. Is that right?
Familiar.
Yes, or maybe it went, or she might have been the one who stepped in. But anyway, yes, so I remember that very well. Was August of that year.
It was August, and so
yes.
It was. The good news is the library got power back faster than most other places. Some of us were without power in August in the Midwest. For my house was 13 days with
Oh my
3
goodness.
children. It was real gross and real terrible, but we made it through. But because we had such a great partnership with the community, that I showed you the picture of the patron support on the west side. At the downtown library, we were able to open a little bit faster, and even when we weren't, uh, we did have some generator support that the city provided, and so we just rolled out these tables, and we had charging stations that you could plug everything in because you had to do something. And then again, because people knew that there was need, one of our local hospitals used our parking lot before we were able to open and had a mobile medical device charging generator, because people who have CPAP machines and other medical devices that need power, they couldn't get it at home. And so that was there was a really dicey time for the community for quite some time. And what I learned was when everything has happened to everybody at the same time, that is a very scary experience, but you come and you work together. And we had shown that the library will do whatever we can do to help people. Our city, our community, whoever need. We sent these little charging stations out to every city department because our IT had things that their IT didn't have. We had mobile hotspots that we were able to deploy, those kind of things. And so then when we had our fire at this facility that you can see on your screen, it only happened to us. And so everybody else had capacity to give. They were not hurting at the same time. And so, obviously the fire department was amazing, but then the city community development was like, what can we do? And we have a community partner across the street that is Waypoint Homeless Services. And they had a classroom space that they were not using at the time. And they said, would you like this to be your computer lab? We know people need computers. You guys think you're going to be closed for 4 to 6 weeks. We will just give it to you. If you want to bring over computers and you can staff it, you can have a computer lab for all of those people who don't have that access. And like, what an incredible thing. We didn't even have to ask. It was just offered. And that was, again, because of these ongoing relationships and because we had a trustee who was also on the board over there. And that relationship really helped us.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. And a question is the library in any way integrated into municipal emergency response planning, especially with all of the things you were just talking about?
Yes, we are, in a couple of ways. So Cedar Rapids also, we have a history of catastrophic events. The derecho is the one that was the worst in my tenure at the library. We had a major flood in 2016 that caused the entirety of the downtown, including the library, to be shut down, but we didn't actually take on water, so that was wonderful. In 2008, there was at that point, other than Katrina, was the second most catastrophic flood in the history of the United States. It did hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. Like, the entire downtown was decimated, and that is why the library on your screen was built. We talk about all the time, because we're building a new one, like, if we were giving naming rights, this would have been the FEMA Cedar Rapids Public Library, because that is where the funding came from. And so after all of the FEMA funding that came through in 2008, we are required as city staff to attend NIMS training every year. I don't think everybody has to do it. It's NIMS. And that NIMS training is all about chain of command and how things work in crisis. And it is just riveting stuff. But that is the federal emergency management system. And so all Cedar Rapids staff have to be trained in that. So that is definitely part of like the overall response. And through that NIMS training, you have to identify who are the essentially essential services staff members. All city directors count as essential services. So even though I do not report to the city manager, I report to the board of trustees. I'm still a city director. And so when the 2016 flood happened, I would have to go over to Central Fire every day and talk about, so here's where the water level's going to be, and here's where this is, and attend all of those like emergency sessions. And so as the library director, yes, I am considered part of that emergency response. And again, because Cedar Rapids has experienced so many terrible natural disasters, we also have a requirement that all city departments have to have emergency plans and written emergency plans for all different. And so ours are, again, unique to the library, obviously, because we have unique facilities, but we have to keep those registered or put on the city website, and we're a part of that process as well. Does that actually answer the question?
I think so. Let me know,
Okay.
Steve, if it doesn't. Any other questions that anyone has for Dara? I remember listening, yes, and Steve says, thank you very much, that it does. And I did put in a link to the FEMA NIMS, which stands for National Incident Management Systems. I had to look up the acronym to see what that was.
And there's a 4-hour training that is just the standard training, but then if you are considered essential services, there's a second 4-hour training.
And you've probably done them all.
I have, and you have to do them annually.
Oh.
Once your community has had to take FEMA money, that's the trade-off, is that you have to continue. I don't know how long. I mean, probably 5 years, but then we had another one, and so we got to do it again. And after the derecho, we got to do it again. So I think in Cedar Rapids, we will be forever doing federal emergency management training. But you learn things. And I think that we do have a really great system for when things happen. Each city department has obviously assets that maybe other city departments are not well aware of, like our hotspots and our charging stations are a really good example of, we have things that are meant to be public facing, and other city departments just don't have that stuff in the same way. And so our assets can be part of a broader community response, but they won't know that unless I'm at the table to be able to have those conversations.
Right. Another question is, do you have any specific suggestions for developing the relationship? You said you've had 4 mayors in your time at Cedar Rapids. So if you have specific suggestions for developing that relationship with the mayor to be able to support the excellent trustee choices that you've been able to get for your library.
So my first, this sounds way more underhanded than I mean it to, but like, find out what they care about. And hopefully, the easiest is when there's some overlap between what they care about and what you care about. And it has been particularly effective for me to develop a personal relationship with that leadership, because I'm probably not going to be able to develop the library relationship first. And what I mean by that is, in my experience, my mayors have not been typical library users. We've got great meeting facilities in this library that you're seeing on your screen. And so in those meeting facilities, I can guarantee my mayors have been in my library. So I can start there, but that doesn't mean that they're checking out books. That doesn't mean that they're going to programs. That doesn't mean that they're really engaged in what we're actually doing. I would love it if I could start there. But historically, I have not been able to. What has been very effective to me as a new mayor is elected, because again, I don't report to the city manager. I don't get to have that same interaction and interface that other city directors do sometimes. And so I will always, within their first month, welcome them to the city and say, I would love to be able to give you a tour of the behind the scenes parts of the library that maybe you haven't seen. So you can understand, again, the assets that you have that hopefully will be helpful as you develop your vision and your dream for what you would like your city to be. And that's a great place to start. My current mayor is very well known for being part of one political party that is a very popular political party in the state of Iowa, and a very staunch supporter of a specific former president. And so that, especially with the Moms for Liberty stuff and the book banning stuff, like when she got elected, I was worried. And I did the tour with her, and I just, you got to capitalize on your own strengths. I am who I am. I am very direct. I don't really know how to sugarcoat things, and that has not been effective for me when I've tried. So I just said, honestly, Tiffany, I really just want to know how hard this is going to be. How do we feel about book banning? And how hard am I going to have to work to try and convince you? And she was like, I just think that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I am who I am. Because she told me all about this book about Hiroshima that she read when she was like 10 years old, that had really graphic pictures that if her parents had known, they would have been horrified, but it made her think about the world in a much broader way, and that she was deeply affected by this book she read as a child, and she wants all children to get that same opportunity. And I was like, okay, we can disagree on anything else in the world. If we can be on the same page on that, I can work with you. And then like a couple of months ago, she was at some sort of speaking event, and someone came up to her and started just railing on her because they thought that she was actually part of Moms for Liberty. And she does not know how they got that idea, whatever, but she came up to me and she was like, I just need you to know, I don't know how that's out in the community. I don't know how people are saying that, but that is not who I am. And I do not want my library director thinking that about me. And that showed me how well we've developed that relationship over the last couple of years, that she even gave one whit about what her library director thinks of her, means that we have been able to develop that relationship over time.
That is a great story. And I think a great way to close out the webinar. We are at 1:59. Oh, just hit to 2 o'clock. So thank you so much, Dara, for a great session today.
Thank you all.
And thank you all for joining us. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar, which will also be sent to your email. We really appreciate your feedback. Our next session in this track is with Jocelyn Sansing, and we'll begin at 2:30. We hope to see you there. And if not, have a great rest of your day. All right, I stopped recording.